So one thing that I've said a lot recently, especially when I read the news, is that I always wanted to live in interesting times and I should have been more specific.
Wow, Eric, that is a full-on jinx.
No, I mean, it's happening. I mean, it seems like politically we are just crazy, but
it's too much. It's too much. I would like to live in precedented times, not unprecedented times.
There you go.
Yeah.
But, we're not the only people who have lived through interesting times. Looking back 50 years, something that happened in 1973. Have you all ever heard of the Saturday Night Massacre?
No, but I wonder, did that inspire Elton John's Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting song?
Who knows?
Who knows? I mean, it's a great song.
Honestly, I don't know. I mean, the time might be right because early 70s, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Because he was big in the 60s, but I don't know if that song came out until later. Anyway.
I think it was definitely a 70s song,
right,
but maybe, who knows?
Hook us up, let us know.
Yeah, let us know.
This is a Watergate story, and even though Watergate, the actual break-in happened in 72, and Nixon wouldn't resign until 74, Watergate, this scandal lasted a long time.
Long time.
And I mean, it's just all through 73. It's all people were talking about was Watergate. On October 20th of 1973, Nixon had to ask 3 times for someone at the Justice Department to fire the special prosecutor who was leading the case against him. Because, presidents generally don't do that. They don't run the Justice Department like their own personal law firm.
So shady. It's such shady business. Well, they didn't until 2016.
Well, they apparently didn't until 1973. I mean,
Yes.
we act like Donald Trump is came from nowhere. He came from Nixon is where he came from. I mean, this is why everyone's like, Biden should pardon Trump. I'm like, oh, hell no. Because if Gerald Ford hadn't pardoned Nixon, maybe history would have gone a little differently. I don't know.
Somebody could have learned a lesson. I don't know.
Maybe.
Just crazy
Just
thought.
saying. Or maybe we just not would have wanted to elect criminals anymore. Maybe. What a thought. Anyway, the Attorney General refused to fire Archibald Cox and resigned. Then the Deputy Attorney General became the Attorney General and refused and then resigned. And then the Solicitor General, Robert Bork, became the Attorney General. Number 3 at the Justice Department, became number 1 in a day and said, sure, I'll fire the guy. This would be a turning point in the scandal because impeachment proceedings hadn't begun yet. 10 days later, they started. Nixon's approval ratings dropped. People on both sides, a lot of whom were defending him, were like, you can't fire the lawyer who's just doing his job and, building a case against you, who, by the way, totally broke the law. Bork, by the way, does that name sound familiar to you DC types?
No.
Robert Bork was nominated for the Supreme Court by Ronald Reagan in the 80s and is one of the few times that a president's nominees to the Supreme Court was rejected by the Senate. The Senate said, nope, not that guy, because they remembered him from this. And it's a very DC kind of, term, is when someone gets borked, it means they got rejected for what should have been a fairly easy proceeding.
I just think of bork as when people are trying to say that dogs talk and they're like, oh, bork, bork, bork,
Oh, like the Swedish Chef?
Yeah. Bork, bork, bork.
That's
Fergen.
That's the Swedish Chef, yeah. Yeah. All right, we've become a Muppets podcast, which should make Matt happy.
Yeah. I think we'd have a lot of listeners that would tune if we suddenly turned into a Muppets podcast.
Well, yes.
Welcome to the Rewind Project, where Allie, Matt, and Eric take another look at your favorite milestone movies through the lens of our present day. Will it be a skip, rent, or buy? Stay tuned and find out.
Well, welcome back, listeners, to our 1973 season. Today we're going to be talking about American Graffiti, written by George Lucas, Gloria Katz, and Willard Huck, and directed and directed by.
I'm sorry to that man who's probably not alive, but apologies.
Huyck. I mean, how do you say that?
Huyck.
I did my best. And directed by George Lucas.
It's part of the George Lucas Film Festival that started with good old THX 1138.
At least this wasn't THX 1138.
You know, this was
low bar.
Very low bar. And I walked into this movie with incredibly low expectations. And spoiler to our listeners, I think I'm the only one who liked it. I like this movie.
I was mad.
I did not like this movie.
Okay, well, there you go.
Okay.
Little diversity in there.
Spicy take.
Right.
Okay.
All right.
Well, this movie, unlike the other film we were referencing, does actually have some notable achievements other than just being made. 1974 Oscars had 5 nominations. Let's see, Best Picture, Best Actress in Supporting Role for Candy Clark. Best Director, George Lucas. Best Writing, Story and Screenplay based on factual material or material not previously published or produced. That is the weirdest.
Basically,
Best Original Screenplay is what we've moved that to. Although, I have to say, just a little rabbit hole about that. I always thought that a screenplay based on factual material, not based on a source, but like you had to research, that should be the other. Original screenplay should be a story that you just made up that's fictional.
I think so, yeah.
But if you write like a history thing, but you don't have a source that you're basing it on, it goes under original screenplay. I never liked that.
Oh.
So a movie about real people that's not based on somebody else's book or play goes under original screenplay, and I disagree. That's all.
Well, but you do have to like write the story, even though it's based on factual events, because it'd be kind of like taking a fictional story and writing a movie based on a fictional story.
Well, that's
it's
adaptation. I mean,
thing.
to me, you're still whether you're adapting history or adapting somebody else's novel, you're adapting. To me.
Okay.
And having adapted things in the past, there's a lot of work that goes into adaptation. I mean, a book is not a movie, and to make a good movie out of a book is actually hard because books get really internal hard. And, you have to like make them all into dramatic scenes that work. And anyway, sorry about that little rabbit hole.
You've convinced me.
I have opinions about things. Hi, we've met.
It was also up for the Oscar for Best Film Editing, too. It had no wins, unfortunately. 1974 Golden Globes, 4 nominations and 1 win. So Best Motion Picture, Comedy, or Musical, it actually won. So this was Best Motion. It won Best Motion Picture.
Stop it.
It did, for Golden Globes.
It's not a comedy or a musical. I hate, as I have said previously, the categories in the Golden Globes and how they split them up are so dumb.
It was comedic. I don't know that it was a comedy. You know what I mean? There's a difference.
Yeah, I would say it was a dramedy, but I wouldn't say it wasn't like a big serious drama until the last 10 seconds of the movie, which we can get into.
Yeah.
It was nominated for Best Actor in a Motion Picture, Comedy, or Musical for Richard Dreyfuss. Best Promising Newcomer went to a male, went to Paul Le Mat. He was actually a winner. So actually it was 2 winners. I'm sorry. I forgot about that.
Lies.
This way you should always check yourself. And then Best Director, Motion Picture, George Lucas, he did not win, but he was nominated. And then lastly, in 1975, BAFTAs, because it finally made it over to Britain, Best Supporting Actress nomination for Cindy Williams. They snubbed Candy Clark.
Well.
Well, I never.
Honestly, I mean, it's so subjective, all these nominations. If you told me that this was nominated for Best Supporting Actress at the Oscars, I would have guessed it was Cindy Williams. I loved Candy Clark in this movie, but I would have guessed it was her because she just seemed a little bit more prominent. And she had a near-death experience.
Well, she had more of a character arc, too, I kind of think.
Yeah.
As small as it was more. She definitely had more screen time. So I kind of feel like she was actually snubbed by the Oscars.
I do too.
I think the BAFTAs had it right. This movie is actually number 62 on the American Film Institute's list of the 100 greatest American films as well.
For those listening, no, we're just looking at Allie's face. She's not pleased with this news at all.
I was like, sorry to everybody under that. Yikes.
Well, you know what was just under it is Cabaret, which is my favorite movie ever, is number 63.
I guess I see the sort of like Americana side of it. I get that sort of like 60s nostalgia. But
this is a very American film. I mean,
yes.
Just it is the slice of, motor, of driving cars, cruising up and down, and drive-ins and going to the sock hop. I mean, you can't get much more American.
I don't know what Graffiti has to do with anything, honestly.
It's a better title than what he originally had. It was like One Night in Pasadena or A Quiet Night in Pasadena or something like that. Was the original title.
That sounds like a Twilight Zone episode.
So for those of you who haven't seen the movie, basically the plot is it's an educational film on the dangers of listlessness, alcohol abuse, and the onset of puberty with modern youths face.
Youths.
Did you make that
Youths
up,
are rioting.
I did.
Okay.
That is the best log lines. I just take mine from IMDb, but I like your opposite log lines.
So the cast starts out with a very familiar face to many people, with Ron Howard as Steve.
Wasn't he credited in this movie as Ronnie Howard? We're pre-Happy Days, post-Opie.
Which he plays such a nicer version, but a similar character in Happy Days. I mean, it's basically this movie turned into a television
pretty
show.
much. I just, as your hotness correspondent, I will say that all of these people in this movie are much hotter when they are older.
I don't know. Ron Howard was pretty cute when he was younger. I don't know that I find him as attractive.
Cutesy cute, not like hot cute.
Was Ron Howard ever hot? Hot?
Exactly.
I don't know.
No, I guess not.
I mean, nice guy. I'm sure he's a very nice man.
Apparently, by all accounts, he is.
Sorry,
he's
Ron.
a dick in this movie.
He is a dick in this movie.
Okay.
Punch him in his face.
Okay. He was 18 in this movie, and he wanted to have his cake and eat it too. And
hashtag patriarchy.
Well, sure. But, the whole thing is he's a dick so that he can learn. I mean, he definitely learns his lesson before the end of the movie.
Yes, he does. But it was like, you take your girlfriend out, and at the night before you're about to leave, and you're like, I really think it would be good for both of us as we can grow as people if we just date other people, because it's going to be long distance. And it's just not going to work. It's unfair.
Relationship.
Yes.
Yeah, fuck that guy. Seriously. It's not going to work. Those relationships almost never work, high school to college. Sure. But the way he phrased it, it was like, I am doing you a favor. I am helping you out. You just want to bang other girls. Just say it.
Well, and it sounds like he's not going to bang a whole lot of other girls, because we learn later on that if his girlfriend had not basically thrown herself at him, they never would have got together in the first place. He's not really like a player.
Is he gay?
I don't know that we're supposed to read gay into it, but I think he's just, he's got a nice car, but he just doesn't know how to. He's not smooth.
To the ladies.
He's
an awkward teen.
Yes, he's not a smooth. And the only reason he maybe looks smooth is because Terry is standing right there. We'll get to that.
Oh, yikes!
Well, he turned down. He ends up being a decent guy, or maybe he's just completely awkward, because he does at the end turn down the waitress who is going to throw herself at him, I'm assuming, at the end.
Yes, women apparently do throw themselves at him, so maybe he could get lucky if he wanted to. But I think at that point, I don't think he does it to be a good person. I think he just realizes that he's still in love with his girlfriend and kind of doesn't want to. The idea appealed to him to date other people, but then when this woman's like, hey, do you want to go home? He's like, yeah, I really don't.
It's because Cindy Williams is badass in this movie, which we'll get to.
Yeah.
But for set in the time period where she hashtag feminist, I'm into it.
Yeah,
absolutely. Next up is Richard Dreyfuss as Kurt.
It's so weird for me to see him with like not gray hair and balding. That's how I know Richard Dreyfuss.
Yeah.
You know, that was my entree. And so obviously I knew it was him because he just has a very distinctive look. But it was like really mind-boggling for the first 15 minutes of this movie. Like it just didn't quite sink in.
Yeah, teenage Richard Dreyfuss. Richard Dreyfuss is like your dad. You can't really ever imagine him as a teenager.
No, I sure couldn't. It was very jarring. I love Richard Dreyfuss. I will go on record saying that What About Bob is one of the most underrated movies of all time.
I've never heard you express that opinion before, Allie.
That's my favorite Richard Dreyfuss movie. He's so good. That movie's so good.
It's a tremendous film. He was good in this movie. I liked him. He actually, I don't know. I think he played his part well, where, you know, he's the guy that can't decide whether he's good enough to move on to a big town. Is it just too much for him? And I believed it as he's going through his storyline, and I feel like out of all the characters, he actually did have an actual arc of like kind of coming to terms with having to move on and grow up.
I think all of them had an arc. I think his arc was the one that was like, you know, it was the most dramatic because he gets on a plane. Because his decision, you know, actually takes him across the country, you know, and so that's kind of a bigger, but, you know, Ron Howard had every intention of getting on that plane himself. And his arc was that he didn't, you know, because of what transpires, you know, over the night. And we'll get to the other two in a minute. But yeah, I mean, I think that they all kind of had their thing. And you know, the Suzanne Summers, you know, quick kind of drive-by cameo, I thought was a really good device because he is just grasping for any reason not to go because he's scared. He's just scared. I mean, he's just one of those things like he's never been out of this little small town. He's going to college back east. He doesn't know if he's smart enough. He doesn't know if he's good enough. He just thinks he'll be more comfortable if he just stays where he is and tries to stop time. We're going to talk about that next. But, you know, so he sees this blonde and was like, that's who. And you know, even halfway through the movie, you find out she's probably married and he kind of still doesn't care.
So that's the weird thing is that the opening shot of this movie, which got cut because of budgetary restraints, was actually supposed to be her driving through a drive-in theater. And she's supposed to be translucent, as giving you the sense that she does actually not exist. So she is really a figment of his imagination. Now, I don't know if in the final version of the film, she's still supposed to be that, but because nobody else ever sees her and everybody else has a story about her, I'm assuming that you, knowing that now, that you are supposed to think that really she doesn't exist and she's just a figure.
I mean, I didn't get that only because there's nothing in the final cut to suggest that she's not real. And
except that nobody else will has the same story about her. I mean, because there are various stories. Like the girls thought she was the wife of the diamond jeweler, and then, you know, of the jeweler in town and stuff. So I think. So did we get another version of a story though? I mean, I thought that was I pretty much accepted that as the story. Oh, well, that was just somebody thinking she probably was a hooker, but didn't know and didn't have any information. Here's my question: who calls him at the end of the movie? Was that also a hallucination, or did he actually have a conversation? I don't know. That could be anybody though. That could be somebody just like they heard it and decided to give him a call. I mean, it doesn't. How are you supposed to verify that you were the woman in the Thunderbird on the phone? True.
I mean, I guess it's funny. I was into it and I wasn't asking too many questions about it. And I was like, oh, that's her. But she's not going to come out and meet him right then and there. He's like, I'll see you tomorrow. And he's like, I'll be on a plane tomorrow. And that's kind of at the moment where he realizes, like, to me, this is where I saw his arc kind of complete, is that this is not real. Like, he's finally talking to his dream woman on the phone, and she might be real. Maybe she's not. I'm learning. But, you know, but there's no relationship there. There's no great love for him to stick around for. He doesn't know this woman. Exactly. And it's kind of awkward and it's kind of weird. And he's like, you know what? I've got a life to live, and he's going to go live it. And I don't know. I thought I found it satisfying.
This reminded me, and I don't know if it's a callback to this particular movie, but, during National Lampoon's Vacation, when Chevy Chase sees Christy Brinkley in the car as they're traveling along the route, it kind of reminded me of that.
I wonder if it is a callback to this.
Yeah. That's all I could think about. I was like, oh, well, yeah.
And sometimes when you see a movie that's 50 years old and you're like, oh, it reminds me of this other movie, and you have to realize, okay, this one came first. No,
so, I know.
Yeah,
that's what I'm saying.
I know.
That's
you are.
Why I was like, I wonder if Vacation was inspired by that, by American Graffiti in that sense.
I like that idea. I'm going to tell that to people in the future.
Yeah.
We'll make it so. Next up is the ingenue, Paul Lamette as John.
That's ironic that he's the ingenue, because he's like the old,
He's like the greaser.
He's like the old greaser who graduated, 2 years ago?
Yeah,
3 years ago? A while ago.
Long enough.
I thought I picked up through the movie, he's going to junior college. But he spends his nights, tooling around and being a greaser and picking up chicks while he's cruising. And he's got the fastest car in town and nobody can beat him because blah, blah, blah. But he's an overgrown teenager. He's just trying to stop time so he can be a teen for the rest of his life because he peaked in high school.
We all know those people that were in high school that graduated a year or two earlier and still go to the parties or still hang out at the football games. We had those in college too. We called them, 5-year seniors. But that was always weird and awkward when you would see them kind of hanging around with the high school kids.
Yeah. But I got the idea that John's circle really does worship him. I mean, especially Terry, but Terry would worship anybody. We'll get to Terry in a minute.
Correct.
But I mean, he really is held in high esteem, except that when we first meet him, when Richard Dreyfuss is like, I'm not going. And Ron's like, yes, you are. You're going. What do you want to end up like John? And then John pulls up. And that's how we kind of know that John is trying to stop time and it's not working. And his whole comeuppance is that, he gets stuck with this 13-year-old, which surprisingly was not creepy. That could have gotten creepy so easily. And I never was creeped out.
I thought we were maybe going to go down that route, and I was like, absolutely fucking not. I would have probably turned off the movie. I am glad that it was more like a brother-sister, sort of deal in the end.
They wrote that relationship very well, because you're absolutely right. Because I was immediately when I realized that she was going to be with him the full night, I'm like, oh, this is not good. And they played on that too. Even when he put her head in his lap to hide her from the other people because he didn't want them to think that he was picking up 13-year-olds. And she's like, is this what's called a cop in the feel? And so they played on the idea that this is very awkward.
Yeah.
I thought that was very funny. So
and for a split second, I thought he actually was hitting on her. And then and just because of the way they played the scene, I got that, oh no, he's grossing her out. So she'll want to go home.
Yeah.
And he was actually doing her a favor, which was also kind of cool. But, they actually had a little bonding. When they wanted to get even with the car and they got out, and she distracted them by putting shaving cream all over the windows while he flattened their tires. That was awful.
Delinquents.
It was pretty funny.
I like a prank.
Okay. That is you get hit with a water balloon is one thing. Covering an entire car in shaving cream and then letting all the air out of the tires, though, completely different level of malevolence.
Hey, you don't fuck with John and Carol, is what I'm saying.
That's another Bonnie and Clyde.
Yes, but I mean, it was we didn't care about the girls in the car with the water balloon, but I mean, it was a nice bonding moment for the two of them, because they had been very much at odds before. And I think that his whole arc was that he realizes at the end of the movie that he's got to grow up. He realizes that he almost got killed on the drag strip and that he's probably too fucking old to be doing that. And he also saw his friend's girlfriend almost get killed on the drag strip and just is like, what the fuck am I doing with my life?
Enough.
And I think he gets that because the difference between him and a 13-year-old is different than it would have been. I mean, 17 and 13 is still ew, don't go there. But now he's like 19 years old, and there was a 13-year-old girl in his car, and he's like, it's time. I gotta.
Yeah.
And so that was his arc for me, is that he just learned that it wasn't big dramatic. He didn't get on a plane. He didn't make any huge life changes, but he decided he needed to grow up.
Well, I mean, and earlier in the film too, like when he first races somebody who we'll talk about later, you know, they have that quick street race, and he's like, no, that guy's stupid. I mean, he's fast, but he's stupid. He's already starting to grow up, and he understands that there are consequences to actions, and, you know, they're not always good.
Yeah, he says that, but then he also pulls up next to the car and is like, hey, anybody want to go for a ride? I mean, he's so like, you know, stop it. Just stop.
Next up of the four friends is Charles Martin Smith as Terry.
What can you say?
I mean, like your stereotypical nerd from the 60s.
Poor
He's
Terry.
like Eugene from Grease.
Yes. Although if Eugene Felsnick actually had a character and a screenwriter that gave a shit.
Right. Correct. And he wasn't a caricature of a nerd.
Yeah.
Yeah. This is Rick Moranis' character from
Little Shop.
Little Shop or
Well, I was
or
reminded of Little
Ghostbuster.
Shop all the
I
time
mean,
because, you know, Debbie looks a little bit like Audrey. Doesn't sound like her, but, you know, they kind of looked like they were about to, you know, drive off and do a musical about a potted plant. The two of them.
I do love Little Shop of Horrors.
I do too.
Casting as the dentist.
I mean, apparently Debbie liked him, so maybe, you know, maybe they did later. So.
Who knows?
I mean, so his wasn't so much a story arc. I mean, it was just a tragic events that, you know, led on by like bad decisions throughout the night trying to score. It was really, I think he was the comedy in this entire film. So that's
Yeah, I'd say he had a little bit of his arc was not nearly as defined as the other three. But I kind of saw on his face, and it was just in the performances, at the very end, he does regret telling Debbie all these lies, because I think it finally sunk in like, oh, I probably could have just told her the truth the whole time, and she still would have liked me. And that was just ouch. And I actually don't have a lot of high hopes for Terry and Debbie. First of all, there's an epilogue at the end of this movie, and we know that, you know, spoiler, folks, Terry's not long for this world. But, you know, I think he told too many fibs, and, you know, he's not who she thinks he is. And that's just, you know, I think he was trying to either score or he didn't know what he was doing. And he just thought, I'm not good enough for her unless I make myself into somebody that I'm not. And I think maybe he learned that lesson. It's still better to be yourself. I mean, sounds very the more you know PSA, but it was subtle and I liked it.
Yeah. Next up is Cindy Williams as Lori.
I love Cindy Williams.
Shirley Feeney. So cute.
She was great in this role,
She was
and I'm
really
glad
she
that
was good.
they wrote her in a way that she wasn't just upset and going to take it from Steve. Like, she fought back, and I really enjoyed that. Like, even to the point where they were at the dance and she decided, well, we're broken up. I don't have to dance with you, and went up and danced with a much hotter guy, by the way, the pimple cream boy who's and I just really, I mean, just left Steve there standing by himself with dick in hand. And it was really fantastic.
But I also loved her first scene, though, when she just kind of heard it and just her first thought was, sure. You know, I mean, and you could just see on her face, she wasn't sure, but she was trying to be super duper grown up about the whole thing. And then a half an hour later, she realized she was pissed off. But it took her a half an hour to get angry, because sometimes that happens. And I thought that was good writing.
But I'm glad she got angry and not desperate and sad to have Steve back.
Agreed.
Like, that's kind of what typically happens in these scenarios. And I'm glad that she was just like, you know, for a movie that was made in 1973 about a girl from 1960. I mean, they actually gave her a strong backbone. I was like, fuck it. I don't, you know, I'm going to be mad about this. He's being an asshole.
I think she was really sad about it. I think she was too badass to get weepy. Instead, she got angry and danced with another dude, which I liked as well. One thing I will say is that I didn't really realize, again, until the last 10 seconds of the movie. I'm going to just, if listeners, if you haven't seen this, we're going to get to the last 10 seconds of the movie. But in the last 10 seconds of this movie, I was like, wait a minute, where are the girls? Like, there were some pretty amazing women characters in this movie, and I guess all we really care about in terms of the future lives of these people are just the 4 dudes, because George.
So funny story with that. Gloria Katz and Willard Hook did not like the epilogue. They wanted to cut it. And George didn't. He wanted to keep it. And so then Gloria asked, well, where are the girls? Mm-hmm. And he said, well, well, then we'd have to have 2 epilogues, and that's just too long. Because the way that they had it all
women
made
just
up
makes everything too long.
Oh, it's so complicated.
Well, so she basically called him a misogynist. So
I would have been on Team Gloria for that one.
I am too. Especially since it's not necessary. It didn't improve the movie.
I have to say, I liked the epilogue. I did. It was like a hard right turn in the last 10 seconds of the movie. So let's describe it in case folks have not seen this movie. After Richard Dreyfuss gets on his plane, he's going off to college. You kind of get this blue sky, and then all of a sudden you see these 4 pictures, and we find out what happens to Steve and Kurt and John and Terry. So Ron Howard, Richard Dreyfuss, Paul Le and Charles Martin Smith. And John, who decides finally to grow up, gets killed by a drunk driver not long after.
Yikes.
Terry gets killed in the Vietnam War, which I actually thought was kind of poignant because this movie was made in 1973, but, took place a decade earlier. A lot of young men died in Vietnam in that decade before. And that just would have been like, ooh, ouch. And Terry is the last person of the 4 that I would have gone, potential war hero. And so that I thought was kind of a nice touch. Steve settled down in Modesto, California, which I just assumed they were in Modesto, California, because I don't think he ever left. And I assumed that he married Lori. And then Kurt ends up being a writer in Canada. And I'm like, what the fuck is this? Stand By Me? Here we go. But because same kind of a thing.
I kind of took that to be that he's like a conscientious objector.
Yeah, I did too. He moved to Canada because he was like, fuck this, I'm not going to get drafted in Vietnam. So he's a writer in Canada. Interesting.
Very specific reason for that. Yeah.
But I liked it. I liked the fact that it's all of a sudden, we had this one night in their lives, and then you found out kind of what happened to them, and their lives kind of took these interesting paths, and 2 of them didn't make it to 1973, which made it kind of tragic in a way. But it got me. I was into it.
The weird thing about the ending for me is that I didn't know if this was actually based on then true events or real people when he put in an epilogue, and that confused me. And I'm like, huh? I don't know. I honestly didn't need the epilogue. I didn't need to know what their fates were. I like knowing that they were on new paths based off of the events of that one night was enough for me. So I didn't. I mean, it didn't add anything at the end of the film for me. So, and they should have included the women.
And they didn't include the women. I would have been interested to find out. Mostly, I assumed Lori married Steve. I was interested in what might have happened to Debbie. And I'd be curious if we asked George Lucas, like, where's Debbie in 10 years? I would.
She moved to Dallas. No.
Stop. Stop that.
That was good. That was really good. The epilogue didn't, I just wanted the movie to be over at that point. So I was like, okay, cool. I did notice the omission of the women though. And I, of course, didn't like that.
I mean, because they had just as long of a character as the boys did. So it felt unfair.
I mean, it's interesting because we talk about the fact that, we're glad that Lori got pissed off rather than kind of just weepy. And I am too. But I know why George Lucas made that choice. It's because her getting weepy would not have served his story, because Steve needed to decide to stay. Lori was just there. Lori kind of in a more passive way, and I'm not saying this like, girls are passive. I'm saying more along, Team Gloria. George Lucas is kind of misogynist. It was Steve's story. He was the one that had the decision to make, and he decided to stay. And she basically got her man back. But she didn't. It wasn't her decision that was going to end that story arc. It was his.
Well, but I mean, in that story arc, the fact that she kind of, in a sense, rejected him, made him question himself. Yeah. And so that's why he needed to stay. And
it made him really sad. And then when he found out that she was riding along in a drag race and could have been killed, which she almost was, he speeds there because he knows he has to fly to her side. And that's just a plot development that makes him realize what's what in his own head.
That would have been an interesting ending if she actually died, and so he does move away just because he can't stay in that city anymore.
Okay, you didn't like the epilogue because you thought I was dark, and you come up with that shit? Jesus. No, he needed to stay. I mean, at the beginning of the movie, Richard Dreyfuss is staying and Ron Howard is leaving, and at the end of the movie, they've kind of switched places, and for reasons, because it was the best thing for both of them.
Which was interesting too. I'm glad they did the swap.
He needed to stay. He needed to stay in town and become an insurance agent in Modesto. Steve.
Well, he saw how much people needed insurance after that car crash too.
All the drag racing.
Next up is Candy Clark as the aforementioned Debbie. She was fun. I liked her.
I liked her a lot. I don't know what I wish. I kind of thought she would have been a little bit more kind of boop boop be doo baby doll voice. Like there could have been a lot more comedy there with her, but I kind of appreciated the fact that they didn't do that because not everyone in the 60s with a big blonde bouffant was also Betty Boop, she was just a real girl.
Which was nice about all the characters. Some of the people that had less screen time were more of a caricature.
Sure.
But she and Terry together, they seemed like real people, even though, they were kind of, simple real people.
And I honestly couldn't tell whether she was playing him or whether, did she believe all of his stories? Because I kind of think maybe she did. But she'd kind of have to be an idiot too. This guy is clearly not like,
Right. He's not Rico Suave.
Exactly. And he's got all these stories about how cool he is. Now he goes hunting,
Jeep.
In his Jeep. All of this bullshit. And it's kind of like, but I think that we're supposed to believe that she's got a good heart and she trusts people when they talk to her. Because she hasn't yet learned that boys lie to pretty girls to get what they want.
Yeah. She seemed very earnest in all of it. So I really did like her as a character.
Yeah, she was sweet.
Next up is Mackenzie Phillips as Carol, our quintessential teenager of the 60s.
Talk about a child star that got her life pretty fucked up. She was in show business. Her parents were in show business too. But man, she's had a real shitty life.
So her dad was John Phillips of The Mamas and the Papas. Her mom was not Michelle, though. She is China Phillips' half-sister, I believe.
Half-sister, right.
But older. So John and either a first wife or another woman. I don't know who Mackenzie's mom is. But yeah, she had a rock and roll showbiz kid life, ended up in, I remember her from One Day at a Time in the 70s. That was, she was great on that show. And recently she was on Orange is the New Black as an inmate, and she was like on 6 episodes. She was great on that. She's very, very good, but yeah, really super duper fucked up life. And, it's interesting that she played the young girl in the car with the older man that she shouldn't have been with. And she spent most of her childhood with an older man she shouldn't have been with. Who's going to tell Matt?
Her dad. But apparently, she said it started at 19 for 10 years. But
was her dad Woody Allen? What is?
Well, her dad was John Phillips, who was kind of,
He was gross.
He's gross. He's a gross dude. I thought Mackenzie Phillips was great in this movie. I think she did exactly what she needed to do.
I think she's a great actress
for Carol, and she was. And I'm glad that they did cast someone who wasn't at all Lolita-ish. Like there was, from the very beginning, there was just zero sexual tension between her and this older man. He just turned around and was like, what? Oh, shit. Oh, come on. And then first thing I was about this, she's my cousin. I'm babysitting and all that kind of stuff. And I liked this storyline. I thought it was kind of fun. I was I was relieved that he dropped her off at home. I was sad that her storyline was over because I enjoyed Mackenzie Phillips as Carol. She was fun.
She was just annoying enough too, like not over the top. So the two of them was a very interesting evening. I did enjoy that story.
And she got all the really annoying 60s teen slang and actually made it sound like that's the way she spoke.
Yeah.
I mean, it was boss.
Bitchin'.
That whole scene was
bitchin'.
Bitchin'.
Next up is Harrison Ford as Bob Falfa, the beginning of all the Star Wars naming. I don't know. Bob Falfa does not sound like a real person.
No. It sounds like it's real close to alfalfa.
Yeah. Bob was a dick. Bob was like just a super big asshole. And it was interesting seeing Harrison Ford do this because, of course, he didn't play many dicks once he got famous. But
Han Solo was kind of a dick.
He was a roguish dick with a with an unwieldy charm. Bob Falfa was not charming. Han Solo has way more charm than Bob Falfa. And even though Harrison Ford is like, as soon as you saw him, it's like, holy shit, that's Harrison Ford. And he had a much bigger part than I remembered him having. I mean, he kind of figures into two of these storylines in a big way. Between the final drag race with John and then riding around with Steve's girlfriend.
Which that was a shocker too. Like I did not see that coming. Cause like, where did the girl that he was riding around with the entire night disappear to? Like all of a sudden she's gone and she seemed to be his girlfriend and he's still driving around. I guess maybe he dropped her off and was like looking for John still, but like, I don't think they live in the town. I think they came from somewhere else. So that kind of was like, okay, so he ditched that broad for another chick. I guess it was really strange. Ellie does not seem amused by any of that.
Ellie didn't care.
This was a really long movie for me.
Well, we're almost done with the cast list. Last is an honorable mention to Wolfman Jack as the disc jockey. So he played himself really, but he doesn't announce himself as Wolfman Jack. He pretends that he is just some disc jockey that, just plays the Wolfman's tapes over and over and over again. But you're also supposed to believe at the end of the movie that he actually is Wolfman.
Oh, he was. I mean, he was playing himself. And by 1974, everyone knew what Wolfman Jack looked like.
Oh, yeah.
In the 60s, what Carol said is, I love Wolfman Jack, but my dad won't let me listen to him because he's, black. I think she said a Negro, in the movie. And a lot of people did think he was black. But by 74, everyone knew what Wolfman Jack looked like. So as soon as you saw him in the radio station, everybody but Richard Dreyfuss knew that was Wolfman.
Yeah. Apparently, he spawned, other personalities. Cousin Brucey, who was apparently on Sirius XM. My mom still listens to him on Sirius XM. So the Wolfman Jack legacy lives on in 2023. Everything old is new again. What can I say?
Well, speaking of Wolfman Jack, this movie is kind of the sounds of the summer. I was kind of, it was interesting, like listening to this movie because like a lot of it was like, surf rock. Like my first concert that I went to as a kid was actually the Beach Boys. My mom took me to the Beach Boys concert for my birthday. I listened to a lot of Beach Boys actually when I was a kid. I was a total dork.
I love it.
but the music was almost like another cast member. I mean, it was just like there was so much of it and it was so prevalent. Now I know, Eric, a lot of times you don't notice music in a movie, but like this is completely different.
Yeah, I noticed all the music in this movie because it's pop songs, you know, and it's not a score that's meant to kind of be in the background and heighten your emotions. It's the music that everyone in the movie is also listening to. Unlike a film score, all the characters can hear this music as well.
Mm-hmm. Which that was really interesting because they're all listening to it on the radio. They're bopping along with it. So you're actually almost brought into the movie and experiencing their life with them in the film, which is kind of interesting. This was the second film to actually kind of skip a score and actually favor pop music in place of that tradition.
I love that. I love it now when I love it when I can, you know, listen to some, you know, go see a movie and be like, oh my God, I have to get that soundtrack. I feel like when I go see Barbie, it's going to be the same thing. Like I'm going to love all of the songs, you know, from the Barbie soundtrack, and I'm going to have to go and buy the album.
The first one for me that actually was like that was Batman 1989, because it had a score by Danny Elfman and it had all original music by Prince.
Bad Dance.
Yeah, so it was like you got best of both worlds in that movie. I was actually that's the one that always sticks out in my mind. But the first film to actually do this though was Easy Rider, which was in 1969, so just a couple of years before this film came out.
Okay, I'm going to totally date myself, but the biggest album in my high school life was the original motion picture soundtrack to Pretty in Pink. Ooh. Psychedelic Furs, Suzanne Vega, OMD, stacked.
Which brings us to our next thing. This movie was kind of a playbook for John Hughes, in my opinion. As I got to the end and I was starting to, like, you know, kind of think about like things for us to talk about. This is the first time I can remember like a high school ensemble. Like this is about the kids in a high school and like the hijinks that ensue. And all I could think about was Breakfast Club. Like this is,
and it probably spanned about the same amount of time as the Breakfast Club because most of the movie probably took place within about 8 hours.
Yeah. And I think too, and obviously after all of the John Hughes movies, you know, there's Dazed and Confused, there's Fast Times at Ridgemont High, there's, you know, all of those sorts of ensemble-y coming of age movies that you can tap to now currently.
Is that your favorite genre, Allie?
It's my least favorite genre.
Before or after, you know, schmaltzy holiday movies?
That's a real Sophie's choice. I would say that I hate holiday movies, schmaltzy holiday movies, like a little bit more.
Okay.
But high school coming of age, it's our last gasp of summer is a close second. Real close second, yeah.
Are you ready for some fun facts?
Yes.
Lay it on me.
The funner, the better.
The funnest.
So starting off, George Lucas offered the crew members screen credits in lieu of pay because of the low budget. So he couldn't really afford to pay them. So they got screen credits instead for the film. So until that time, screen credits had only been given to department heads. So a lot of people took it. And that's kind of like now it's become standard that, you know, you give all the crew members
oh my God, the credits after a Marvel movie takes as long as the movie.
So long.
Thank George Lucas.
Did we not pay these people? They got paid. They don't need to see their name 1 millimeter high on the list of all the painters and gaffers on a movie. Like, why are credits? That's one of the reasons why I like old movies, because there's the cast, there's the director, there's who wrote it, and the credits are over. And at the end of the movie, it just says, the end.
Yeah. It says Technicolor.
Yeah. That, and first of all, you know, okay, low budget filmmaking, that happens. I get it. But, you know, figure out a way to pay your crew members. That's not okay.
Yeah, but I thought that was interesting. It was an interesting fact.
That is an interesting fact.
American International Pictures ultimately passed on the movie because they didn't think it was violent or sexual enough for their standards. So I found that interesting because in
Is that what
1973.
they're saying?
Yeah. So this is Corman Films is basically who this is.
Oh, okay. Well, that makes total sense then.
Yeah. They auditioned over 100 unknown actors before casting Richard Dreyfuss as Kurt.
Wow. So they he was unknown. Like this was his plucked out of nowhere.
This is like one of his first films. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, he was not a big name.
Okay. Well, George has an eye for talent apparently because Richard Dreyfuss is huge.
Yeah.
I mean, he had done a bunch of stuff like TV and things, but I don't think he was really a big.
But he was not a marquee name. Like nobody came to see American Graffiti because it was Richard Dreyfuss's new movie.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
I'm pretty sure that's true.
Because everyone knew who Ronnie Howard was. I mean, Andy Griffith Show was nationwide, and he was famous.
Yeah,
so
he was very famous.
Yeah, he was probably the biggest name in the movie. Yeah. Harrison Ford took the part on the condition he wouldn't have to cut his hair. That's why he wears the Stetson the entire movie. Well,
if he didn't pay his crew, he probably didn't pay Harrison that much either. So you know what, Harrison, good on you. Don't cut your hair.
Well, I mean, he was concentrating on carpentry at the time. He was not an actor at this time. Like, they had to kind of convince him to be in the film. Like, apparently he had the look that they wanted for the movie. But the guy, the character had a buzz cut. And then lastly, that Douglas DC-7C, that plane that Kurt flies off on, that had previously been used by Grand Funk Railroad the year before. Like, that was the plane that they were traveling on.
Did George Lucas have a hookup with the Grand Funk Railroad? Is this another, low budget story?
Who knows, right?
No, it's just one of those coincidence things. They had been leased the year before. I just thought it was kind of cool that they had leased it for a year and been flying around on it.
I bet George Lucas just hung out at the airport and just waited for a plane to go by and got his shot.
He's probably like, this had a lot of ladies and weed on this plane.
Okay, are you guys ready for a game? Calling this High School Musical. So we've had High School Musical and Glee. Why not another go? Pitch American Graffiti as a musical. It can be a movie, a Broadway show, or a series. However you think it best moves into this next type of genre. Okay, what do you keep? What do you change? And pitch me one big number and who writes the music. Okay, you guys ready? Okay. Allie, you up first because you look so bored right now.
I am actually not bored right now. I'm never bored with you all, but just in general, what we're talking about. So, okay, I am going to do this as a movie musical.
Okay.
But I am going to keep. There's no exterior set, so everything is going to be set on the road.
Oh, I like that.
So, no inside of the high school, maybe we see the drive-in because that's part of the road, but, none of the, we don't go into the disc jockey, maybe we just hear his voice, so all on the road. And then my one big number is the opening number, and it's going to be called Cruisin' with an apostrophe, so N apostrophe, and it's going to be this really crazy awesome choreographed number where people are driving along and we're gonna have people jumping into each other's cars and while singing, of course, and the cars are gonna be spinning around and we're gonna do a little do-si-do, but it's gonna be the big number that kicks everything off to let you know that we're gonna be cruising tonight, and that's basically the premise of the whole movie. And who's writing the music, I don't know, this kind of came to me, I don't know, again, like a fever dream, but he's the right age. I think it's time for Huey Lewis.
Oh, I love that.
To have a jukebox musical. I know that he's written songs for, movies and he's done some other things, but I think that Huey Lewis will write the music for American Graffiti and especially the big number Cruisin'.
I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Eric, how about you?
Okay, I'm going to Broadway. I'm going to open this up on the Great White Way. I actually love the idea of American Graffiti the musical. I think it could be, really, really, really fun. And it would be one of the first times that a true, honest-to-God jukebox musical would actually be fun because, as you say, Matt, the music was so integral to the show. So I would actually not hire a songwriter. I would actually just dig through the archives, and every single song in the show would have been a hit between the years 1959 and 1962. So you would have just got, the feel of the time. And every song probably has a different songwriter, and that's totally okay. When I was looking into like songs that would really fit, I think sometimes, if you wanted to do like, a Beach Boys song All Summer Long was in the movie, that would be perfect, for kind of a group number at some point. That might be the Act One closer or something. But I found a song by Connie Francis. And remember, Terry tells Debbie that his big pickup line is that she looks like Connie Francis. So I found a song sung by Connie Francis, and it's called Don't Break the Heart of the One You Love. And it's all about don't treat me cruelly as you are wont to do. And I think it's a perfect song for Lori. When Ronnie Howard is in the bathroom hanging out with Pimple Cream Guy, and she's decided that she's mad or sad or whatever, she sings this really sad song, and then he comes out and she dumps him for another guy. But the song, as is often the case in musical theater, is kind of what's really in her heart. And when I listened to the lyrics, I was like, that's perfect. I mean, it would work very much like It's Raining on Prom Night from the stage version of Grease, where Sandy's kind of sitting alone and singing this really sad kind of 50s song. I think a jukebox musical based on American Graffiti that really sticks pretty closely to these four stories that are intertwining and going through could be really great. I would see the hell out of that show. I would absolutely go, and I'd be super excited about it.
Cool. I like that one too.
Yeah.
Okay, so I went a little bit different. I am going to keep the four stories as well. I want to do a Netflix series, like a short series from them. That way you can develop the stories a little bit more. The one thing I'm going to change, though, is I'm going to make John gay and be in love with Kurt, just to piss off the right wing.
Always a good goal.
Yeah.
Always a good goal. So John is still a loner, but now there's a little bit more different reason, because now he's upset that Kurt is leaving. And now, because he's feels stuck in this world and doesn't know where to go.
To be a gay man in 1962 Modesto, California. Jesus Christ.
Exactly. Kind of explains why he's a loner. So he ends up, his relationship with Carol actually becomes a little bit more important because she's going to be aged up just slightly. But she's, as the night goes on, going to reveal kind of how she's a tomboy, and the two of them are going to realize what they have in common. So as he's dropping her off, they're going to have a duet together about their future and staying the course, is basically what that end night. So it becomes a little bit more sad and melancholy, but also kind of hopeful for the two of them, that they found somebody in this town that is experiencing the same thing or a similar thing to each other. And then I was going to have it. I couldn't decide. I think I'm going to have Pink actually write the music, because that song is important. And she's about rock and roll. Originally, I thought about Billy Joel because I kind of felt like Americana. He gets that. But I think Pink is too. And I think she could probably write in this genre very well.
I like that.
That's mine. Okay. Well, now up to skip, rent, or buy. Skip is... fuck this town, I'm out of here. Rent is, I'll stop off at Mel's and I'll get a burger and a shake. And buy is, I'm just cruising all night long. So, reverse order. Eric, skip, rent, or buy?
I have to say, I am Kristen's favorite, Rent with a buy rising on this one. I'm not going to buy it. I'm not going to, it's not something I'm going to watch at a regular interval. But I have to say, I really, really enjoyed this movie, and I enjoyed it. And then we got to the epilogue, and I have to say, like, the epilogue, I found it it was very short, but I wish it had included the women, but I found it very moving. like that two of these guys, like, you know, when I think about Terry now and I think about that whole storyline, he's not going to make it. You know, he's going to be killed in Vietnam, and what a waste. And, you know, just when he was turning into his own person, after, you know, a whole childhood of trying to be somebody else. And I don't know, it really got me. And I was shocked because listen, I love the Star Wars movies. I love the Star Wars mythology. What I love about Star Wars is not necessarily George Lucas's direction, particularly when we get into the prequels. And THX 1138, I was like, new. And then this isn't even like a space opera. It's not even his genre. And I just kind of thought, I don't know that I'm going to like this movie at all. And maybe my very low expectations kind of led me to enjoy it even more. But I really, really liked it. So, yes, I would highly recommend it and would happily watch this again with anyone who hasn't seen it.
Okay. Allie?
I'm a skippity skip doo-wop a doobie doo. Boogie boogie boogie. Yeah, I mean, I tried to keep an open mind. I knew that this was not going to be a genre that I enjoyed. I tried to keep an open mind, but like, I was a good 10 minutes in, and it just was not for me. I found it just kind of boring. I didn't really care about the characters. You know, the acting was fine, and, you know, it was nice to see all these famous people, you know, young and fresh faced. But yeah, this was, I don't ever need to see this movie ever again. And I probably would have been fine not seeing it.
Okay. I am a rent. I have to admit, I'm more like Allie, where I don't know that I was really enjoying it to begin with, but as the stories progressed, I was starting to get it more and more, and I was feeling it more and more. As we've talked about it now, and I kind of like really think about the threads that were, you know, woven here, I actually enjoyed the movie a little bit more than I thought I did. So I definitely think this is a solid rent. You know, if it's out and you've thought about watching this movie, go ahead and watch it. If friends wanted to watch it and I was, you know, hanging out with them, I would watch it again. I mean, there's nothing. This isn't a horrible film. I'd be interested to see what their takes are on the movie after we finish. So it's a solid rent for me. Okay, so that's
diversity. We love it.
Well, next week we have The Way We Were. I've never seen this movie.
Yes, which up until recently was our theme song. I noticed that YouTube was going to start like taking things down and you know, sorry, we never paid Marvin Hamlish or the Bergmans for their tune, so we got rid of that. But yeah, when I at the time of this recording, I actually am very busy over the next 2 weeks. So I watched The Way We Were last night in preparation for the pod. As soon as the theme music started up, I was like, oh, it's time for another episode of the Rewind Project.
Well, that's it for us in this episode. Thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed. I'm Matt.
I'm Allie.
I'm Eric.
Be kind. Rewind.
You've been listening to The Rewind Project. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Radio Public, and Google Play. Please subscribe and rate us. It helps a lot. We love your comments and questions. You can find us on Facebook, Twitter, and via our new phone number at 202-618-2402. Thanks for listening. Be kind. Rewind.
You heard it here, folks.
That's
she
right.
said shit on Germantown, Maryland.
No, apologies to all my high school friends listening to this. It's not what I mean. Matthew. That's how rumors get started.